Hi, I'm Kirsten. I'm the Executive Director of Women in Film Los Angeles, and I'm excited to invite all of you, welcome. It is early on a Sunday morning here in Los Angeles. I'm excited to welcome all of you to Carla 2020. I want to give a big thank you to the Women in Film and Television in Sweden and also the Swedish Film Institute for organizing this incredible 3-day conference of people from around the globe talking about issues that matter to women and non-binary people from all walks of life. So, and thank you to these incredible panelists for joining us. I'm gonna read a quick statement from the Carla organizers before we start. They have written this value statement that I thought was really impactful and meaningful. And I'm reading a part of it. If you wanna read the entire thing, it's online on the Carla website. As members of the global film and TV community working towards a more inclusive and just world, we share this statement as an affirmation of the values we strive for these next few days to reflect. We're committed to an intersectional framework in our fight for gender equality in all facets of life and work. We believe that Black Lives Matter. We believe that LGBTQ+ rights are human rights. We will support and amplify the voices of artists that are undervalued, marginalized, or suppressed by politics or other circumstances. For those of us who hail from colonizing nations, we acknowledge that our ancestors claimed and plundered the land of Indigenous people. We acknowledge that the wealth of wealthy nations was built on the exploitation of natural resources and indifference to the lives and suffering of humans perceived as other. We acknowledge that the cultural establishments of which we are part, which fund our work, or control visibility and status, are still only at the start of a transformation towards true representation. We're committed to be part of that transformation, and we're grateful for this chance to practice these values.
In other words, this is not the Republican National Convention.
Oh, I have the wrong room, sorry.
It is very much not. We're here today to talk about ReFrame and specifically one element of ReFrame called ReFrame Rise. But before we do that, I wanted to just give a quick overview of what ReFrame is. So ReFrame is a partnership between Women in Film Los Angeles, the Sundance Institute, and 75 ambassadors and partner companies who have been working over the last 5 years actually to try to transform the way that the entertainment industry functions. And so we started out with a convening 5 years ago, and through that built a theory of change with the belief that if we make a strong case to businesses that inclusivity matters, that if we provide tangible steps to change practice and culture, and we develop a pipeline of talent, that this industry will actually change. And as part of that, we built a program called ReFrame Rise. So we selected a group of directors who had already accomplished an incredible amount, made award-winning films and television shows, who we really believed were poised for bigger careers if they so choose, and surrounded them with a team of sponsors, with industry executives, other directors, to help, in addition to their teams, their agents, managers, publicists, etc., to help them get clearer on where they wanted to go and how to get there. And so that's what this program has been working on in the last year. We have a couple of our sponsors and a couple of our ReFrame Rise participants, our directors here, to have a robust conversation about what you all are seeing in the industry, what has changed, what hasn't changed, how sponsorship is working. But before we get into the depth of all of that, I thought we would just start with an introduction. I like when panelists introduce themselves. I feel like it's more personal than me doing it. So if you could just say your name and I thought it'd be fun just to kind of start with, since most of us have been in quarantine for the last 6 months, at least here in the US, and I know many other parts of the world, something that you have been doing that's out of the ordinary or indulgent in the last few months. So we'll start with you, Stephanie Allain.
Oh, I didn't know indulgent was part of it. I haven't been that indulgent, but what I have been doing is making masks, which is my comfort activity, and trying to keep all my friends safe and just making as many masks as I can. And the fun thing is getting my drumming practice really on point. So that's been my go-to besides tons of work.
Right. How about you, Des?
Well, snaps to Stephanie for drumming. That's
I
very
hear that.
for my indulgent activity. So were we just, I'm sorry, I forget the question other than what's your indulgent activity. I was just so focused on like, have I been indulgent? Am I not indulgent?
Or, okay. What have you been doing the last 6 months?
I have been listening a lot and reading a lot and actually slowing down. I think it's been really indulgent to I haven't been working as much as I usually work. I've actually been trying to listen to what are my desires and what are my priorities and what do I want to work on. So actually it's been a really slow, I realized that I speed walk everywhere because I'm always late. And I stopped speed walking. So I've just been, and I realized I was born and raised in New York City. So I'm always just like, there's always a fire under my ass. And then suddenly quarantine started, I was like, what if the fire went out? And I've been going very slow. So that's been a pleasure.
Nice.
Awesome. Paul?
Hey, well, other than just writing and catching up, I've got a few shows that are waiting to get back into production. We got to figure out COVID and all that. I have been doing a lot of mixology. I did 100 days straight, every day of a evening cocktail show to raise money for charities. Started out as COVID charities and then became more Black Lives Matter charities as circumstances changed. And it was fun, and I've been inventing drinks. So there you go. So I've invented a few cocktails, and I'd be happy to share them with anybody who wants them.
Yes, please.
We might take you up on that. Hanelle?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Hanelle Culpepper, and sadly, I don't feel I've been too indulgent. I guess I have only indulged in hugs from my 5-year-old whenever she wants. I let them happen. So that's been, I forgot to lock the door. So hopefully she won't come in during the Zoom and ask for one. But yeah, I've been so busy with work that's one of my regrets, that I haven't slowed down. And drumming lessons have been on my bucket list since I was in my 20s.
Awesome.
I have it on when I turn 60, this is what I'm gonna do. And I should have just done it during this. So anyway.
It's not over, don't worry.
There's still time.
Right. The crippling solitude will commence.
That's actually a good introduction, Hanelle, into the question I wanted to ask you, which is, before the pandemic and also, possibly still during the pandemic, what would you say are the unique challenges and barriers that women in this industry face?
Yeah, there's so many challenges and barriers that apply to everybody. It's a very hard nut to crack. But I would say, thinking deeply about what could be unique, I think one is just bonding with, well, I'm gonna just go for guys, bonding with guys. I'm not a sports person. And so, some of the usual ways on the golf course or coming in and bonding over what happened in the basketball game last night or great plays, that's not something that's in my wheelhouse. So I have to work a little harder to find what's going to be those common threads, just to bond on a personal level, because you can work, but it's having those more personal connections that really make things happen. And then one of the other things I found is that a lot of women and including myself when I was starting off, and other women that I've talked to, we feel like we need to be like A+, or we feel like we need to believe we are A+ ready to go, instead of realizing that we already are enough, that we've had the tools and experiences, we've learned, we've done this. We need to trust that we are capable to take on the job. And the other thing is that sometimes we need to ask for it. So I very much remember talking to my manager and saying, well, she knows I'm a director. She would give me an episode on her show. And my manager's like, well, did you ask her for an episode? I'm like, no, because she knows. Like, no, if you want something, we have to ask for it. We can't assume that people will offer it. You know, even with your talking to your mentors, you need to ask for what you need. We need to speak out and be very clear about that. And then the other unique thing that I would say is that sometimes there is doubt expressed by others in what you've done. Like, oh, she's a woman. Did she really do her action sequences, or did a second unit director do it? You know, did she really figure out all her VFX stuff, or did someone else do it? And so that's something where it's not about us, it's about changing the perceptions that others have, and realizing that, yes, we can do it all, and I did it all. And sometimes you have to have those conversations with people, but I wish that that wouldn't be one of the assumptions that they have.
Right. Desiree, I have a similar question for you, but a little different, especially because you just said that you've spent the last few months really sort of slowing down and thinking about what you want to be doing and what you want to be making. And I wonder if you see that through a gendered lens when you're sort of contemplating it, or if you experience a gendered lens sort of when you bump up against roadblocks. And if so, what those kind of roadblocks have been for you.
It's hard for me to identify what is a result of my gender and what is a result of being specifically in my own skin. I mean,
right.
Also I'm queer, also I'm Middle Eastern, I'm an immigrant. So I navigate things in my own specific way. I think I'm Iranian, so Iranian has given me a lot of entitlement. I have much more entitlement than I would say my female classmates from film school. I studied film at graduate school at NYU, and there was a real difference between like the space I'd allowed myself to take up versus them. And I think that might have just been being gay too, coming out and having like no fear. Actually, I made The Slope, my web series, right after I came out of the closet. And it is what outed me to my entire extended Iranian family. And I think that gave me a real sense of like fearlessness that I see in a lot of my male contemporaries. I think, but I also don't want to say that this is self-imposed. I do want to clarify that like you're not seeing yourself on screen. You're not seeing the wunderkind. Like when I started NYU, we all wanted to be Cary Fukunaga. Cary had just made Sin Nombre as his thesis film. It was based on a short that he made as his second-year film that did really well and won an award at Sundance. Then Sin Nombre, I believe, won Sundance, got a 3-picture deal with Focus. It was a different Hollywood. But like, you know, it was that trajectory. And there was no woman at that time that I saw do a similar trajectory. So I think also when you are blindly carving out a space for yourself with no idol, but also no mentors, I see a lot more mentorship with male filmmakers and a lot more camaraderie between male contemporary filmmakers of my, I would say, stature. That kind of community doesn't exist, and that's why I was so attracted to this program.
Right. That's actually a really good segue into my question for Paul, which is, Paul, you have, you've been an advocate for women and people of color for a long time, both through programs like ReFrame and also some of your own work through Powder Keg and other things that you do, what you do on your sets. And so I wanted to have you just talk a little bit about how you, other than having the commitment to it, like how you practically are able to support filmmakers and what kinds of change you've seen because of that kind of sponsorship.
Well, I mean, for me, the biggest thing is, while I think mentorship is really important, I think sponsorship is the most important thing, because, you know, I think for any of us who have any kind of say, or you know, all our clout is diminishing these days, I have to say, but whatever we have, to not use that to create opportunity, that's the biggest problem. Because, you know, I've mentored for years, and it's great. It's, you know, nice to have people shadow you on set and everything, but there's always this feeling of like, okay, I hope you learned something, but, you know, that's it. Versus if we can, you know, what we're doing with, you know, with ReFrame and the sponsorship we're doing there, to be able to go in and say to a studio, we guarantee this person can do it. You know, we find the opportunity and do all that. And that's why one of the reasons I wanted to create my company Powder Keg, because even though it's short form, to be able, because what I find is so many people who are great don't have a, you know, so many female directors don't have the opportunity that a lot of male directors have, just to have a calling card. And so, you know, and it's a way for us to be able to vet who can do it and who can't. Because look, you know, you want to promote everybody, but there's some people you run across and you go like, oh, they're not right for this, or they're not ready, or whatever. And so if we have it, you go like, wow, look at how great they did. They were really good to work with, and really, you know, just figured it out. Then we can go in and not take a chance and go like, I think they can do it. Then we can go in and go, this person can do it. And I've had great success with that, you know, with some of the filmmakers who've done features that we've produced. And yeah, so it's really just, you know, I think the crime is if you have any kind of power and you don't create opportunity, then you are falling short.
Mm-hmm. Did you say a few minutes ago you feel like we're all losing credibility? Was that the?
No, no. I think anyone else with clout, the way that the industry is happening now, it's so corporate now that the days when you go in and say stuff now, it's kind of like you still got to run through a million different filters. So, you know, it's hard to go like, we got a lot of power, but we definitely have, you know, have say. Right.
And people listen. I mean, executives listen to you when you tell them.
Sometimes, yes, exactly. Depends who they are. No, but you know, we had, you know, I mean, an example was, you know, Jen Robinson wrote Someone Great, and we wanted to get that made. She wanted to direct it. She hadn't directed a feature, and you know, we were able to go. She came into Netflix with us with this amazing pitch, and put a trailer together and a lookbook that was like you've never seen before, and it just, you know, and then we were just able to go like, and Ted, we guarantee, you know, which it's shitty that you have to do that she needed that, but what, you know, in my thing, it's just whatever gets anybody to then do the movie that people love, and they go like, wow, they really were the real deal. And then, you know, the pool will grow, and then hopefully it won't take this kind of advocacy, you know, eventually.
Right.
I think it's also one thing to keep in mind about this job is that it's one of the very few jobs out there that you have to prove your worth before anyone's employed you to do it. And that is a position that requires a lot of privilege in all the different ways. And also, as a male director, I mean, I felt this very much between my first and second film, was that I watched male directors who had released films around the same time that I had released my first feature in 2014, and they were going on to just take gigs directing scripts that, you know, were kind of like B films. Like it would be fine if it didn't work out, no one was going to hold it against them. And I definitely had this weight of director jail, and that the next feature is really going to prove my worth and the longevity of my career, and that I had to be really strategic because I wasn't like an Aronofsky where I can do the fountain and then like come back with the wrestler and be like, okay, keep taking risks on me. I knew that there was a shelf life of how long I could be trusted, and that I would have to continue to self-generate and support myself through other means. Like, that's a crazy job description where they're like, could you make the feature and then make the second feature and then make some more things so I can take a risk on you and maybe employ you? And that's not a position many women are in. But like let's look at class, let's look at race, like all of the trickle down effects of like, that's a very white male position to be in.
And also there's no clear path, right? So like in most jobs, there's like, you know, you get this training and then you do this and then and then
you have to 100% deliver the product and be like, can you hire me now to keep doing this? Can you trust me? Can you have faith that I will deliver this continuously? But then how do you finance that original thing? How do you keep pulling the favors to make that work on spec? And when someone like a Paul Feig can come on board and say, I vouch and I will help enable this risk. But it's a business, no one wants to take a risk.
Right. And it's completely subjective too, which makes it even harder.
Stephanie, this concept of risk, I think, comes up a lot, right? That they're big budgets, it's a lot of money. And so, studios, networks don't want to take a risk. And yet we've seen, I think Ava DuVernay is one of the standout examples of someone who's put, dozens of directors on a television show who had never directed TV before. And this is Queen Sugar, and the show's in its 4th season. So apparently that's working. And so how do you think we get around this or overcome this idea of risk?
Wait, that's the big question, right? I mean, I think that programs like this are helpful, to be honest. When you can surround a director who's already directed and allow them to come to you. Like, I think what really works in the sponsorship paradigm is, it's not so much what we do, it's like you were saying, Desiree, how much you ask for what you need. And I think Hanelle does that really well in terms of, we're all busy. We have our, day jobs and our night jobs and our other jobs. And that's the other misconception. Like, I don't know about Paul, but like, I'm still hustling out here, like, it doesn't get any easier, to be honest with you. But you have to persist. And so one of the great things about the sponsorship that I think Hanelle cracked is, she just picks up the phone. Like, if she needs something, she just picks up the phone and asks for it. And that activates us. And in the program, we've surrounded our ReFrame Rise directors with 5 or 6 different sponsors who all have different interests and jobs. So, Hanelle is more of an action girl, right? And I would say, and some of the people in our group are more action-oriented filmmakers, they're more interested in that. But if there's anything we can do, we do it, because she calls and activates us. And so I think that's helpful. It's an ebb and flow. I mean, we're at a really interesting time right now. I've been around for a long time. My first movie was 1990, Boys in the Hood. So it just in that 30-year span, the interest in other material ebbs and flows, right? So now in the wake of George Floyd and the uprising, there's definitely a feeling that change has to happen now. And I remember right after that, that's partly why I've been so busy. Like, the phone is kind of ringing off the hook, but that has to translate into real projects. Alana Mayo just got promoted to run MGN Orion. And the whole thing is about, underrepresented talent. That's huge. I mean, that is pretty huge. That is a big systemic change that hopefully she'll be able to open the door and greenlight some movies by women and people of color and LGBTQ and everything. So, I think it's just about staying in it, staying committed, staying focused, staying passionate, and just not letting up, because change is slow, but it is happening. I'm an optimist, so I like to buy into the fact that we are getting more voices out there. But I don't know.
I want to get into that sort of hope and optimism in just a minute, but there's a question coming in from the audience that I thought was worthwhile to kind of go back to for a minute, which is, Hanelle and Desiree, can you both talk a little bit about your career trajectory and what got you to ReFrame and this program, where you started and how you got to this place? So we'll start with you, Hanelle.
So, well, I made my first short film back when I was working at Sundance, and I was just really inspired by the filmmakers who were not waiting on Hollywood to give them a break, but were getting a camera and making it happen. And I was like, I've been out here a while trying to get money for stuff. If I want to be a filmmaker, I need to make a film. So I made that short, which got me into AFI's directing workshop for women. And through that program, that short and another short I made, were playing the festival circuit, and I met a writer whose feature I optioned, and that went on to be my first feature within. That was bought by Lifetime. I went on to do a few more Lifetime movies, and then I had enough of a reel of stuff to get into NBC's diversity program. They gave me, and I was picked by Larry Trilling to shadow on Parenthood. He gave me my first episode, and that allowed me to, in addition to another showrunner that I knew, that I had not said, hey, I want an episode, but that my manager said, tell her what you want. And so I, told her, hey, they've hired me. She was able to get me an episode on that show as well. And so that kind of what started the television career. And since then, I mean, I've been lucky to do a variety of stuff and I've done genre and drama, character-driven stuff and superhero stuff. So it gave me enough of variety of things that, I kept getting bigger projects. And so that's what led to me getting into ReFrame Rise, which really has been like another kind of game changer for me and helping me do it. Doing Star Trek got me Picard, and then Picard plus ReFrame is what led to me getting my first, my first more studio feature that I'm going to do with Big Beach. I got a lot of feedback and help from my ReFrame team on going after that pitch and my lookbook and all that stuff. So I credit those two things coming together for where I am now.
Excellent, thank you.
Can I ask what you did at Sundance when you were working there?
I was the assistant to the executive director, Kim Brecker.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting that you had a job at Sundance watching everything. Did you find that helpful or soul crushing? I feel like I
found it helpful. I mean, it definitely wasn't soul crushing because that's why I activated myself instead of just going after meeting and hoping that this would be the one that would give me the money or greenlight my movie. We have to make things happen ourselves. So it was inspiring for me. Watching people like you who were making your movies.
Well, that's the thing is, like, I think a lot of times it's hard to watch other people succeed in the ways that you want to succeed in, which is why I would really struggle. I think that job, like I was a receptionist at like a furniture store for a couple of years and like a nanny. And I found those jobs more comforting because I was like, I can't watch other people live my dream. But I also think you're a better human being, and I can tell that you have a pure heart. So that's the difference between the two of us.
Oh, Desiree, come on.
Desiree.
Well, yeah, that's a way to get into. I have a very different trajectory, which involves a lot more entitlement. I went to NYU and I went into a lot of debt that I'm still in, which I think is really important to be honest about, that I have like 150 grand of debt, even though I am living my dream and doing, like, every hope I had for myself came true when I went to film school. And I'm supporting myself, but I'm in a lot of debt, which doesn't bother me because all Persians are, and it's kind of a way of life. Our eyes are bigger than our bank accounts. So I went to film school, and at film school I made a bunch of shorts, but they didn't get into any festivals. I was rejected. Like, I spent thousands of dollars applying to festivals and was rejected everywhere. And then I made a web series while I was at film school with no money, just being in it myself, because it was with my girlfriend at the time. And it's how, like I said before, how I came out. And it was just about a pair of like homophobic, superficial lesbians living in Brooklyn. And it was us kind of lampooning ourselves. And we did it to like make our classmates laugh. It was supposed to be for a school project, but it just screened really well in the room. So we put it online. And this was in 2011. 2010. So there wasn't really a big, it was kind of early days for all of that. Like Broad City was just starting up, High Maintenance hadn't started yet. Like it was early web content days. And we just put it online, not really knowing what our next steps were. Maybe we would adapt it into a script that we would shoot for real. And then it grew a following, and we got, you know, on different, like we got invited to Rotterdam. Filmmaker magazine featured us as one of the 25 new faces. And from the press, like every week, every month, there would be a reason to keep going forward. And I started writing a feature inspired by it called Appropriate Behavior. And that became my first feature film. And after I was able to raise a tiny budget together through like a tax deductible scheme in the UK, because my producer lives in the UK, and that's how we put that together. And then that went to Sundance. And then, but afterwards it was still like a very difficult climate. It was 2014 when we premiered, and we sold with like no MG. No minimum guarantee. So the film, you know, was a really tiny lesbian comedy. And then I optioned the rights to a book called The Miseducation of Cameron Post with the producer of Appropriate Behavior, Beachside, which is like a sister company to Big Beach, that's now defunct after making Cameron Post, produced it. And that won the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance. And then right while I was making Cameron Post, I was writing a television series. I lived in the UK. I made it for Hulu and Channel 4 in the UK called Bisexual. And that premiered in, I believe, October of 2018. And yeah, that's how that all came together. But I didn't work in television until until I made my own show. And then since then, I've been doing episodic television while I write my next film.
Kirsten, can I say one fast thing is that I mentioned I got into AFI's directing workshop for women, and it was really helpful. And their application process is open now. So if there are any female filmmakers watching who think that might be a great program, definitely go to AFI's website and investigate it and apply.
Thanks, both of you, for giving that context. I think it's helpful for the panelists just to sort of get a sense of that. I wanted to come back now to talk a little bit more. You know, everybody sort of has touched on how sponsorship works, but Hanelle, you talked a few minutes ago about how your sponsors helped you get that lookbook together. I remember hearing that story from, I think, your first sponsor meeting around that, and if you and Stephanie could talk a little bit more about how that, like how the sponsors were able to help you shape that. Let's actually start with Stephanie, sort of your take on the role of the sponsor in that.
Great. So one thing in the old times when we could gather together, we had a lovely meeting at my house. Everybody came in person, and we sat around and we talked about, well, we asked Hanelle what she wanted and you know, what she was doing and what her dreams were. And first of all, she came so prepared with like the 6-month plan, the 1-year plan, the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan, you know. So we spent a couple hours really just chopping it up. And over the course of that, she said, you know, I'm about to go in, I think it was the next day, to pitch on this feature that she wanted. And she had her lookbook with her. So she whipped it out and we all went through it. And there were certain things that, having pitched a lot, we recognized could be enhanced, either pulled back or added. And so we all sort of chimed in, and she took all the notes, and basically you can take it from there, Hanelle. I mean, I think it was helpful, right?
Yeah, it was hugely helpful. And actually was later that same day. So after I left the meeting, I got in the car with my assistant, and we were going through making all the changes. And yeah, some of it was you have too many of these pictures. It's still, you know, it's taken away. And so by taking away, other images became more prominent. I think we did talk about reordering and everything. So I was in the car making all these changes, and then I went to that meeting, and they were just very impressed with with, you know, what I was, my vision for the movie. And so I always credit that they were able to help me kind of, I don't know, not clarify, but to make the things that were really special to me pop more, because it wasn't crowded by other stuff.
And I think that's really important, as far as I've done a lot, like Paul, a lot of mentoring. And from my point of view, it's always about, and also as a producer of a lot of first-time directors and writer-directors especially, it's, for me, it's really about trying to understand what their vision is and then trying to help that, as opposed to imposing or giving ideas that have nothing, that you may have nothing about that. The way I think it works best is to really listen and try and enhance that, try and get them on that track. Because that's the kernel of their vision, and their voice is what's unique. And that's the thing that's going to stand out. So I'm a mom, I'm a granny, I'm a new granny. And I like to think that with my own kids, I do the same thing, which is they're all unique, they're all different. And if you can really sort of see it through their eyes and then help them walk that path, that's sort of the most productive, at least for me, way to lend a hand.
That makes a lot of sense. And it actually makes me think about you, Desiree, because I remember in your ReFrame interview, like you were like, I want to make, you know, like basically you were like, I want a studio, like I want my own studio, I want to make whatever I want to make. And that you kind of move between like big vision and then like very intimate stories, right? And trying to kind of balance those two things, being mindful of having a debt and wanting to, you know, direct some television sometimes just to maybe get some more experience and pay off that debt. And I wonder how, you know, A, what you're kind of thinking about right now, and then B, like how the sponsorship has been helpful to you in figuring out how to sort through all those many different things.
Oof. I think I was also, when I had that interview, in a really different place in my life, because I had spent a full calendar year in promotion mode, because the TV show and my second film came out the same time. And while I was editing the TV show, it was like 4 things at once. And I had just been like nonstop on, which maybe some people, I'm sure Paul knows this feeling, that you're like booked 2 years in advance, you have this, you have that, like, and you're just kind of not a human anymore. You're just this like machine of potential and self-promotion and like dreams.
Yeah.
And there are 40 people being like, where are you? You're late. And you're like, I need to take a piss. So I think when you're in that and your adrenaline's going, all you can think is like, it'll be better if I'm bigger. It'll be better if I have all of this. It'll be better if I have my own studio. Better if I could enable. And like, I had all these ideas and these passions, but I think also I hadn't had a minute to sit back and evaluate, like, what does it look like? What does that lifestyle feel like? And it feels like losing control in a lot of ways to me. So I think that this year has been a lot about evaluating, like, what are the stories that I could control? Because also those are still my dreams, to make those big films. Like, I really do have some commercial lust, but at the same time, to approach it at this stage of my career, I'm realizing that I have to make a lot of compromises creatively that I don't want to make. And I'm learning a lot about what kind of lifestyle do I want to lead right now, and what kind of compromises do I make, and how do I think I could build my name and build my worth to get to that place. So that's what it's been about, strategizing for me. And I think before, it was the most essential thing is being able to talk to people about how they're approaching this job that there's no rule book for and there's no water cooler for. So we're not talking, like, we're all going into our meetings blind and doing it earnestly based on our instincts. None of us know how other people are approaching it. So just the same with the lookbook. You're giving your lookbook and you're like, I tried my best, but it's not like I'm looking at other lookbooks and having an idea like what the fuck is a lookbook? Like, to me, it's one thing, to you, it's another. But to have someone who's had 30 years of experience, 40 years of experience, looking at these things as opposed to my 10 of not even lookbooks. 10 years of making my own work with me and my best friend, and no one, you know, and us being judged by one jury at Sundance. Like, that's the only world that I know. And it's been very personal and it's been great for me. But to look at people who have this experience and concrete knowledge and say, can you look at this lookbook and tell me what your opinion is in the context of your years of experience, is something I've never had before. So I don't know if that all links up, but the idea of being able to be in a space with the names and with the organizations and have that wall break down a little bit to be like, I'm meeting with Netflix, I'm meeting with this place, or I have this IP. What would you do? Like, what does this look like from your perspective is a game changer.
Paul, how have you throughout your career balanced the stories that you want to tell versus sort of what the what the market is interested in? Like, what does that look like for you?
Oh, I mean, that's the hardest part of the equation, is figuring out what you're interested in that will have commercial appeal. You know, and whenever I talk to film students or anybody, it's always like, okay, you got to just be really hard on this idea and go, I really love it. But, you know, to me, the litmus test is always, if I didn't know me and didn't know anything and I saw a trailer for this, would I go like, oh, I want to see that or not? But it's impossible to know. You just kind of go with what you're passionate about. You know, and I mean, Stephanie really hit it on the head. It's the scariest thing about sponsorship is you don't want to be going in like crushing somebody's voice. You know, I mean, I worked with enough producers and people over my career. You know, it goes back to when I was in improv, and I was in an improv class, and you do an improv, you know, and the teacher go like, well, what you should have done is, it's like, well, yeah, what I should have done, I could have done a million things. And so, you know, I hate going like, oh, you're wrong, it's this and that. I don't want to do that, because all I'm doing is imposing my voice on somebody. And like Stephanie said, what's so exciting is somebody's new voice, a new perspective, a new take on things. And so for us, you know, it's just kind of like, well, how can Stephanie said all this, how can we help you bring that forward? And the only thing I sometimes think I can bring is like, just think about this. Is there a more, you know, commercial way to do it? It's such an ugly word, commercial, but, you know, just to get it, you know, if you want to make a big studio film, you want to do something that's going to, you know, really draw people, which obviously that's what we all want to do. You just have to be really hard on the ideas. But, you know, it's a long way of saying it's just sponsorship is such a tricky thing, because I just want to empower that person to bring something that I'm going like, holy shit, I never would have thought of that, you know?
Right.
And just to jump in on that, I really never think about commerciality, which is probably why I'm, you know, where I am. But what I think about in terms of sponsorship and asking people, it's always a question about, did you mean this? Because what I took from it was this. And they're like, God, no, that's not what I meant at all. I was like, oh, okay, well, think about this. So it's really, for me, about clarifying the vision so that it's clear, because I really believe that if it's clear and you're talented and it's unique, it will find its place in the marketplace. You know, whether that place is small or medium or big, that's up to the movie gods. You know what I mean? We just never know. But
right.
If it's clear, then it will find its way. That's how I feel.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Desiree.
That as well. I think what's really incredible about listening to you guys talk too, and this whole dialogue, is a lot about like, how do you protect a voice in the pursuit of the business of making movies and the longevity, like the business of creating a career? Because I think there is a really dangerous spot at this stage of being a mid-career, or whatever we're going to call ourselves, women who have some work behind us, but who have aspirations for something different or bigger. There are ways to be bigger, but are those worth the compromises they take? And that dance is one that is best done with help. I think it's really nice to be able to look at people who have done this before. It is a dance between the commercial appeal of a product and the singularity of a voice. And I think it's really easy to get bulldozed by notes and by the powers that be and by fear.
And I think especially as the industry continues to change, right? Like as we get fewer studios, but then like all kinds of interesting stuff happening in the digital space, all the pathways keep it's kind of what you were talking about in the beginning, Desiree, that there's no one clear way to do this job, right?
And in the words of Goldman, nobody knows nothing. You know what I mean? It's like we're making it up, folks. Like that's what's so exciting about it is it's like we're feeling in the dark and just hoping that what we believe and the talents that we brought to the opportunity will sort of crystallize.
And the big fear too is we don't want to send anybody into movie jail. We've all, Stephanie, we've been around long enough to go like, hey, you followed your dream and it made no money and now you can't get anything made. And it's like, oh my God. So, it's this tightrope.
But Paul, seriously, there's so many factors. I remember my friend Ted Demme, who was making his second film, and the weekend it was opening was the earthquake. 1984. Right. And I remember he called me, goes, well, that's that, and it was because nobody went to the movies, like everything shut down for a while. So I think even if, I don't know, I guess movie jail is one of those things where if you've done what you set out to do, then it's not jail. That's how I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I just speak as somebody who was very, very deep in movie jail for a few years, and it's a horrible feeling. And and I'm a privileged white male director, so imagine what happens. The way things were and the way things that are hopefully we're slowly getting.
No, I know. Also, I think the interesting thing too is like, my producer always said to me when we were editing Cameron Post, which was like, if I had to choose one of three boxes, like, we make the film, everyone loves it, like its audiences love it. We make the film, critics love it, audiences don't love it, but it's a critical hit. Or we make the film, everyone hates it, you and I are so proud. I would choose you and I love it and are very proud. And that's the approach we take. And the question is like, what is the jail thing? Is it like, I see that as like, you make a film, you make a big swing and you miss because it's not what your intention was. And the world falls out of sync, but that's a privilege.
And especially if you listen to other voices and take that swing and it fails, then that's movie jail to me.
And we've all known who did that. We all know people who listened to executives who spent millions more than they needed on the top 40 songs, got clouded by a movie star, like made every choice because of the Hollywood high school dick measuring contest and didn't listen to their own voice. And that is my horror.
Yeah, and it never stops. It never stops.
It's dangerous.
It's really dangerous. I mean, I think that I'm just quick. The litmus test for me is always like, do people watching it enjoy it? I'm an old timey kind of like, I'm all about the audience and I want to make sure I entertain an audience, even if I'm challenging them or whatever.
I see the Rat Pack behind you.
Yes, there we go. Exactly. Make that. That didn't do well, I don't think.
So we have a few minutes left, and I wanted to come back to something that kind of Stephanie had started on a little while ago around hope. And so, Desiree, you have talked about slowing down. A number of you have talked about just sort of, this, even though you're super busy, that there has been some recalibration that has happened in the last few months. And so since we are speaking to a global film community as part of Carla, what are your hopes coming out of the pandemic for the ways that we do business or tell stories or work together or sort of build community? Can
I start? Because one of the great things that has come out of this for me is that the Zoom room actually works. The Zoom room works. And I have a filmmaker in Kenya, and we had talked on the phone. She would come here every now and then, but now we can literally chop it up, and it feels like we're progressing in real time, you know? And so for me, that really, it shrinks the globe a little bit more in terms of being able to work with people anywhere. And that's super duper exciting. When I said I've been working so much, it's because you can pitch 3 different places in half a day on Zoom, as opposed to, you know, scheduling one day and then driving across the day. Not, all those barriers have sort of fallen. And so I think that for especially internationally, we've cracked something that will stay cracked open.
Great, thank you. How about you? Let's go to Desiree.
Oh, I love that. That makes me really happy. And I do agree. The world has gotten a lot smaller. Communication has changed. I have found some, both like personally and professionally, ties to people that our lives never synced up in real life. Mm-hmm. And now we leave each other WhatsApp voice messages, like podcasts, you know, like this is where I'm at. And we can always check in, and it's building depth to the stories we want to chase and the things we want to develop together. I think for me, there's a lot of clarity of what's worth it and what's not worth it. Mm-hmm. And that's become really clear to me since June, since the racial shit went down. Before, right. It was like, oh, we're in trauma mode. So I was just in trauma mode and survival. And now it's like, well, and I always felt this way, but it's become a clarity. Like, I don't want to take up 2 hours of your time unless I have something to say and it's urgent and it's new. And it's funny, in the past 2 weeks, I've gotten more scripts than I've ever in my whole life. Like, I think that suddenly, like, everyone wrote a COVID script and now they need to attach a director. And it's been so easy to read them and be like, nope. And even when they're like, that'll be good for somebody, but I shouldn't tell that story. It's so crystal clear to me that what is here for me to say and what makes sense and what doesn't. And I think before, that was a harder decision to make, and there was more business calculations at stake. And now I feel a really clear calling. And also not just that, but I will say the business of making movies. I want to know where my money is coming from. I want to realize a lot of things. I realized I was like, oh, wow. Even like, it's a lot of privilege is the reason that I have the position that I have, and that I have the entitlement and to even be in debt. That's privilege. And I was like, oh, where are the Black faces in my work? Like, why? Because I'm niche myself, I never thought that was necessary. And now I'm like, actually, I'm reevaluating my own choices. I'm reevaluating the way I approach the story, and I'm reevaluating and also the rooms I've been in. I'm like, oh, every single boss I've had has been a blonde white lady, always. Always. And because they were women, I was really patting myself on the back to be like, I really curated a special room. And then I was like, oh, but I was always the only woman of color. And I was always the only gay person. And I was always the be all end all. And I think I created that. I think I wanted to be, and because that's the way I grew up, the only minority voice in the room, and I could have control over what the minority was saying. And everyone would be like, oh, it's racist if we disagree with her. So I'm looking at those things, and I want to know, like, okay, well, who are my financiers and who are my bosses, and what are the battles that I'm going to have to fight for? Because the last time that I was casting, it was a really contentious argument over, is it racist if we cast a minority in the lead role of a killer or like a suspected killer? And they're like, well, but she's the minority and we don't want to say bad things about minorities. And it was a discussion that was hard to hold my weight in because everyone else was white. And it was like, I got my way at the end, but it was a weird process. and I want to change the rooms and the conversations. I'm okay with that conversation. I just think I shouldn't have always be surrounded by the same faces and the same Oxford educated women who are white and blonde for some reason. Maybe
Paul, I think you have another meeting at 10. Is that correct?
Oh no, I can hang out for another few minutes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Then I'm going to go to Hanelle to sort of answer that question around, how this moment, everything that's happening, the pandemic, the uprising, the economic disaster, is affecting the way that we do business and tell stories.
Yes, well, one of the good things coming out of it is that self-reflection that Desiree just talked about, that everybody's doing, white men and non-white men, all of us are doing it, and all of us are getting a little bit clearer on what stories we need to tell and what should be out there. And so my hope is that as people realize how they can do better within their own worlds, like Desiree saying, not having just white blonde women in a room, I hope that realization stays, and that as we get up and going and moving, and you have those opportunities to hire the different people into your space, that we continue to make that effort to hire those people, because ultimately that will create opportunities for many people who deserve it and haven't had it, because we've kind of been on this machine for so long. And I also totally feel like what is great about Zoom is that when you go in for generals, there's a feeling, right? You come in, you follow that path, but no matter how much you connect with a person, I don't know, there's something about Zoom and being in their house that you feel a little bit more connected. I don't know what that is about. So I hope that this sort of level of meeting people and connecting in a way that is just a little bit less superficial can continue once we're back and meeting each other in the real world. I think those are the two. And then also I do love this, how it has shrunk. I found in this time that it's been a really wonderful time of so many people giving of their time via panels and Zooms and this and that, or even both Stephanie and Paul did like a one-on-one talking to our ReFrame class. So people have been able to share their knowledge. And so hopefully that sort of thing will continue as best as it can, despite us going back to work, because it can always be a Zoom thing. We don't have to go to a theater and gather and do it. It can be virtually.
Yeah, totally.
And Paul, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's really hit the nail on the head. First of all, we're saving the environment, because look at all the water bottles we're not using in those meetings. But also, I think it's been great because it has allowed us time to think about the things that have been happening and learning. If the George Floyd movement, if all these things had happened with life normal, it would be much easier to be kind of on the treadmill, like, oh yeah, and then we're off. Now we have to sit with it. We have to think about it. We have to be confronted with it. And I think that's great, because it's really confronting people. And then, I don't know, like you said, to be able to have these meetings that are I don't turn down meetings like I used to, because like, oh sure, I'll go to my computer and have this. And it's been so great to hear other voices, be able to call these things at the last minute and have everybody there and have everybody from different places and countries and cities and all that. So it's really good. And then I think another weird thing that could come out of this, which I've always wanted and loved, is that we can get back, everything doesn't need to be so perfect, so high tech. We're getting so used to watching, even watching the news, like it doesn't mean anything to go, oh, they're on a computer and somebody's got, crappy internet connection and somebody looks good, but we're just listening to what they're saying. We're hearing things. And so everything doesn't have to be a $200 million movie. Like, you can get to that thing that I've always been wanting, people to, like when I lectured in film schools and all that, like, you have a phone, your cell phone takes better pictures that, higher quality than the 16 millimeter movie I made back in 1997 that cost $35,000, took place in a field. You can make anything now. It can look good enough and you can get your voice out there and tell your story. So yeah, I just think, you know, look, it's been a great time to reflect and to just kind of get centered. And I think the earth and Mother Nature and everybody said, like, all right, you guys, slow the fuck down and let's get this in line.
Thank you all for spending this time with us this morning. For those who are watching, who are in a position to be a sponsor, please do it. Help the next generation and your community move their stories forward. And for those of you who are making work, keep making it, keep telling those stories. And enjoy the rest of Carla 2020.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you,
everybody.
Thank you,
It's an honor to be on the panel with all of you. Bye.
Guys.
Nice seeing you guys.